Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the resistance to listen to a little bit of forest in this Tecnicelpa Congress. We have three presentations with three colleagues here present with us, and they will bring us three different aspects, so it will be quite three different presentations in terms of subjects, and I hope you'll be interested on them, and you'll feel committed then to, at the end of the presentations, to make some questions to my colleagues here. We'll start with Catarina. Catarina, I have to look at the paper. I know we know each other quite well for a long time, but Catarina is a researcher in RAIZ, it's Forest and Paper Research Institute, and she's project manager on biological control of pests. She has a PhD in entomology and worked on integrated pest management in agriculture and forestry ecosystems since 2003 in different types of projects. Currently, she's working in terms of research and extension programs in the identification, monitoring, and control of eucalyptus pests and diseases, as well as invasive alien plants. So, Catarina, please, thank you very much for your presentation.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I have two disclaimers before we start. First, this work is not just ours from RAIZ. It's a very, very long project that we have with Altri and also with ISA, Instituto Superior de Agronomia. The second disclaimer is a bit more uninteresting, which is I made too many slides, so if I skip something, you can then ask me questions. So, perhaps some of you already know this graph. What do we have here? We have that eucalypts are not Portuguese species, they're Australian species, which means that when they were introduced into Portugal, they didn't have any pests, because every tree, every plant has pests that eat it. And similarly, those pests also don't have their natural enemies that occur naturally in Australia. So, what we have here is that when pests arrived in Portugal, attacking eucalyptus, they had nothing to control them, and so they would grow exponentially and without control, causing major losses. So, just like the pests that arrived in Portugal, some natural enemies, our friends, they arrived naturally, and they can control partly or completely the pests. But in many cases, the pests that are here have no natural enemies. So what we do is what we call classical biological control. And what is that? It's 5 not so simple steps. First, we go to Australia and we identify biological control agents, the natural enemies of the pests that we want to target. Then we import them into Portugal under quarantine conditions, under confinement conditions. We study them and we focus firstly on potentially how effective they can be, and very importantly, how specific they are. How risky are them to our local insects or other animals or even human health? That's what we call host specificity, and it's arguably the most important phase of the process. If those agents, those natural enemies, are considered safe, we then introduce them into the wild and do post-release assessments. So I'm bringing you a few cases. Let's start with a pest. This is one of the most important pests that we have here in Portugal. Fortunately, there's been a lot of work around this pest, so it's quite under control at the moment, but we can never fully stop worrying about it. This is the snout beetle. It's an insect that will feed on the leaves of eucalyptus trees, and it can cause massive damage. And a long time ago, one insect was used against it. This is called Anaphis nitans. It's a very, very tiny wasp. It's about 1 millimeter long, and it's what we call a parasitoid. And what it does is it lays its eggs inside the eggs of the snout beetle. And therefore it kills the developing insect, and instead of a snout beetle, we get an Anaphis wasp. I won't explain this story because it is complex. Let's just say that this insect was extremely effective. In fact, Not just in forestry, also in agriculture or in conservation situations, it's a benchmark for biological control. It was highly effective. But, like everything in life, it wasn't perfect. And what happened was it was not sufficiently effective in colder areas, typically in high altitude areas in central and northern Portugal. So we thought, okay, let's find something that will be effective in those areas. So we went to Tasmania and we found several insects and one caught our attention. It's this little insect. You can see it moving. Yes, it's a real insect. It's called Anaphes inexpectatus. It's a relative of Anaphes nitens, but when we started studying it, what happens was we found out that it would grow faster. It had what we call scientifically a higher net reproductive rate at lower temperatures. And we were quite excited about it because we wanted to use them in high altitude areas. So we then thought, okay, maybe it will, how will it react with Anaphes nitens? We found out that Anaphes nitens was a better competitor, but we thought, okay, well, but maybe Anaphes inexpectatus will still help in those cold areas. So we moved on to do the host specificity testing. And we tested 17 organisms that exist in our entomofauna. That's what we call them, the bugs we have here. And while this insect was able to parasitize a small amount of eggs from 2 species, it nevertheless very much preferred the snout beetle. And so, together with local authorities, we considered that the risk was very low, and we introduced it into the field. And this work has been going on for over 10 years. And in this period, we released over 500,000 insects in the field. We did a monitoring session, let's say, in 2020. And at that time, we had released it in 19 locations, and we could prove that it had established in 8 of them. So we were quite confident that the insect had established, but we were not happy because parasitism was very low. So our fear that it could not compete with the Anaphes nitens actually happened. And so we didn't give up, but we thought, okay, maybe we have to forget about the eggs and we have to go look for something that attacks the larvae. And so we found this fly. And this is what they actually do. When they meet a larva of the snout beetle, they pierce it. They inject their own eggs inside the larva of the snout beetle. So nobody knew anything about this fly. We had to understand its biology. It seemed quite interesting. And so we moved on to the most important part, which was host specificity testing. And the group that this fly belongs to has some species that will attack a wide range of hosts. So we were quite frightful. And so what we did was we would place in a small glass arena, 1 female of this species, and then 5 specimens of the target species that we were testing. And just to give you an idea of what the flies would do, this is what we call rejection behavior. This is the fly telling us, I hate this, I'm afraid of it, don't give it to me. That's how they react. Another group of insects, it's the insects that, okay, I'm not afraid of this, but what do I do with it? So we were quite confident that this fly would not attack anything it was not supposed to. I will skip this one because we want to keep on schedule. It was basically the same thing. So we asked for permission to release this insect. We got it. And for the last 2.5 years, we've released roughly 25,000 insects so far in 53 locations. And we are still at the beginning. We haven't been able to release a lot of insects because they are very time consuming to produce. We have realized that it is established in at least 2 locations, but monitoring this has not been very easy. So maybe in the near future, I'll have more information to show you. Moving on to another pest. This is another example. This is the bronze bug. And no, this insect is not the color bronze. It's called the bronze bug because it feeds on the surface of the leaves of eucalyptus, and the eucalyptus turn bronze or silver. So it changes the color of eucalyptus. And in this case, yes, we also have a natural enemy that we can use against it, but this time it was way much easier because this pest had been causing problems in South Africa and South America for quite a while. And so they had already found an insect that could attack it. And it's this species called Clerucoides noac. And if Anapsnitans is small, this one is half its size. It's 0.6 millimeters long. It's very, very tiny. So, because it had already been used in other places, we already knew a lot about its biology, so we just had to focus on host specificity testing, making sure it only attacks the target pest. And this time, we tested 19 non-target species, and we had no parasitism, no interest in those other organisms. And so, we went on to release it. Again, large numbers of insects have been released. They've been released in 82 locations. We've confirmed parasitism in 18 of those locations. And we think it's established well, but we still have to do some making sure that it's being effective in a way that translates into euros or tons of wood. And now for the not so good news. This is the most recent pest in Portugal. It's called the tortoise beetle. We just call it Trachimella. This insect has been giving us for the last 2-3 years a lot of headaches because it has the same potential as the snout beetle to cause damage. It will completely destroy eucalyptus plants, but we do not know anything that attacks it. So right now, all we have is using insecticides, which is definitely not a long-term solution. So there's another Trachimella species that exists in South Africa, and it has a natural enemy. It's called Enoghera reticulata, but studies in California have shown that it's not effective against the Trachimella species that we have here. So this is bad news, but it's also hopeful because as we speak right now, we have a team in Australia and we have already told them you cannot return to Portugal until you find something that eats this pest. So maybe they'll come home for Christmas, maybe they won't. We'll see. And now just to finish off, I think I'm on time, hopefully. A sneak peek, because technically what I'm going to talk to you about is not a pest, but we have a lot of problems with alien invasive species in our forests. They compete with eucalyptus. They grow very vigorously, and we spend a lot of money controlling acacia plants. And as of a year, we've started working with insects that eat the acacia. So it's like the way Trachimella eats eucalyptus, we're looking for something that eats acacia. We have found 4 insects that are quite interesting. And last week, before I sent the presentation, we decided that, no, we don't have 4 insects, we only have 3 because one of them was naughty and ate something it shouldn't. So the one on the right, the caterpillar, that's goodbye. So now we have to work on host specificity testing, and we'll see if we're lucky, if everything goes well, maybe in, 5 years, we'll have something controlling acacia in the field. Just this final slide. I'm not going to say all the names here, but this is a decade-long work, and a lot of people have helped us along the way. A lot of institutions, national and international, and so it's a big thank you to all of them. And thank you all for being here tonight. I am done.
Thank you, Catarina. I'm not sure if I can thank you for the flies, but that's another question. No, I don't like flies. So we jump in for the next presentation. It will be done by Pedro Graça. We're jumping also from subjects. Now we're talking about breeding, multiplication of plants. So Pedro will talk us about hydroponics as a method, a new method to clone eucalyptus sorry, I have to start thinking in English. Improving the propagation of eucalyptus clones. Pedro is a researcher in Raiz also, and he's specializing in clonal propagation of eucalyptus. He holds a bachelor's in biotechnology and a master's in applied biology, where he focuses on different related subjects with plant propagation and resistance to diseases. At Raiz, he works on the new approaches, innovative approaches, like the one he's going to present to us in hydroponics to improve propagation success of plants. So Pedro, thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. As mentioned, my name is Pedro. I'm going to present some work I've been developing in the clonal propagation of eucalyptus at Raiz. More specifically, the introduction of hydroponics into the methods. So, as you probably already heard today and already know, the forestry sector is very important for in Portugal's economy. In 2024, half of the sector's exports were from pulp, paper, and cardboard, representing more than 3 billion euros. There's a tree species that is a key contributor to this success, which is Eucalyptus globulus. This is a fast-growing species that is known to be one of the best for the production of paper. This is mainly due to the high-quality wood that allows an efficient production of pulp. Due to these various qualities, there was a creation of various extensive genetic improvement programs. Nevertheless, challenges such as the low rooting rates, as well as the high sensitivity to the greenhouse conditions, as well as pathogens, have limited the propagation of elite genotypes. Considering that these methodologies are constrained to the advancement of eucalyptus forests, there's a need to find new methods. One of these is hydroponics. Hydroponics is a soilless cultivation system where the plants are set in a structure with their roots suspended in a nutrient solution. These structures are usually put in controlled environments, and they allow both plant propagation as well as plant cultivation. Key advantages such as the controlled environment, the accelerated growth, as well as the clean conditions appear to be promising to answer some of the problems we have in the propagation of eucalyptus. Considering the high fragility of the eucalyptus during the early stages of rooting, we hypothesized that this clean hydroponic environment could be a great place, a good environment for the early stages of rooting. To develop this, we aimed to test if a new step of hydroponic root induction could improve the success of the overall propagation process. Key questions were if the rootings were able to actually root in the system, and if we would be able to transfer them successfully in the right timings. Spoiler alert, we did achieve these objectives, but let's see how we did this. So, we aim to change a little bit the traditional mini propagation process. This process normally occurs with the collection of plant material from the mother plants, and then the cuttings are prepared from the shoots of these plants. Then the stem basal zone of the cutting is dipped in rooting hormone, and they are then set into the substrate. Our new proposed step is set in between the hormone treatment and the placement in the substrate. Here, the treated cuttings are put in the hydroponic system, where they'll spend a little time while they'll start a rooting process, and are transferred to substrate before the root actually emerges. So this work compiles the 4 different assays from 2023 and 2024, and as well genetic materials from Eucalyptus globulus as well as hybrids. So the specific experimental design, we collected plant material from the mini clonal garden, and after being prepared, parts of the mini cuttings were treated with rooting hormone, while the rest did not receive any treatment. Then, parts of each of these groups was directly set into the hydroponic system, while the rest was set in the substrate, functioning as our traditional control. In the hydroponic system, the cuttings were put into pit plugs, we can see in the middle on top. These plugs functioned only as a support, and we added a control group where we cut the lower part of the cutting of the plug so that we could observe the rooting process. This process is here represented, starting with the cutting. The cutting develops undifferentiated cells with a tissue called callus. This callus is then differentiates and is able and apt to form into root. We established that the transfer to substrate should be made when at least 50% of the group had already reached the differentiated state of callus. After being transferred, the assay was again all together with the controls, and the assay was followed for until the 60-day mark. So we did produce some plants. Here are some enjoyable pictures. Both Eucalyptus globulus and hybrids behaved well in the hydroponic conditions and were able to be successfully transferred to substrate. Considering now more concrete results, we found that when using the rooting hormone, the new added step in the hydroponic system was able to increase the rooting in about 20% compared to the traditional method. We also found that the average mortality was also lowered when adding this new step. Now considering the results without the use of rooting hormone, we found an even more expressive increase in rooting. We found a nearly threefold increase when using the new hydroponic step compared to the traditional control without hormone. Again, in the mortality, we found an even more significant reduction in mortality. Now, overall, what we could see from these results is that regardless of the hormone treatment, the new hydroponic step was able to both increase rooting and reduce the mortality. The greater improvements were found without the use of both in rooting rate and in mortality were found without using the rooting hormone. More specifically, considering the rooting rate, we found this massive increase in rooting without using rooting rate when we applied the new step. Nevertheless, we recognize that this may be high significance may be due to the low/weak results found in the traditional method without the use of rooting hormone. Considering only the hydroponic step, we found that there's only 5% difference in the rooting rates when comparing the hormone treatments. Nevertheless, it's still curious and interesting that the highest rooting rate, average rooting rate, was found without the use of rooting hormone. So, why does this happen? Why does this work? We are not really sure, but we have some inklings to why. In the system, there's a constant flow of oxygenated water, as well as a formed microclimate. Both these factors can both provide protection to the cuttings as well as promote its growth. The oxygenated water can reduce the growth of anaerobic microorganisms that usually cause diseases such as root rot, and the controlled temperatures and humidities can increase the plant growth. This low stress environment can actually give a jump start to these cuttings compared to the cuttings initiated and only in the substrate. This has several advantages. Considering it being a smaller system and vertically oriented, it is space efficient and allows a precise climatic control. Furthermore, it also enables a reduction in use both in water as well as in substrate. Nevertheless, this is a study that it's still in its infancy. There's a need for new protocol refinement. This may be achieved by testing different genetic materials and increasing the sizes. To prove operational effectiveness, there's an actual need to scale up the size of the trials to see if it's significant for operational scale. There's also need to implement field trials to compare these plants compared to the traditional propagated ones. Furthermore, an even bigger and critical step is to make a financial analysis of this method to see if it's profitable compared to the traditional method. In conclusion, we are able to add a new step of hydroponic root induction that was able to successfully increase the rooting rate and so on the success of the propagation. This new protocol is even more interesting when considering the high results found without the use of rooting hormone. Furthermore, this new methodology may actually be another step taken into the direction to a more sustainable as well as efficient clonal forest of eucalyptus. Just a quick thank you, not only to my co-authors that are not mentioned here but mentioned before, as well as the operational team from Raiz. Without any of these, this work would not be possible, as well as the funding from PRR. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Pedro, very much. So we are jumping now to a new area, and that it's remote sensing. And we would like to welcome Luís Acevedo. Sorry. He's a researcher in the field of forest remote sensing with experience in GIS and LIDAR analysis, as well as RPS and drone operations. He holds a degree in environmental science and forest engineering and a master in Mediterranean forests and nature resource management. He's involved in activities related to drone-based surveys, forest biometry, and rural fires. So the floor is yours, Luís. Thank you.
Hola. So good afternoon. First of all, thank you for the introduction and good afternoon to everyone. Today, what I will speak and explain, introduce to you, it's an ongoing work that we are doing right now, and it's related to the assessment of post-fire landscape recovery after the 2017 rural fires by using satellite remote sensing. So, as the majority of you may know, in Portugal, as in another Mediterranean countries, we have to face every year, every summer, with a big issue that it's wildfires. And in a simple and simplified way of explaining this phenomena, what we have is a landscape that it's with a big biomass accumulation due to continuous land abandonment and decline of the traditional forest management. That together with the climate change, it creates optimal fire-prone conditions that at the end triggers large wildfires that produce extensive environmental damages as well as human and economical losses. What is also true is that straight away after the wildfire, the vegetation starts to recover. And this recovery depends in factors such as fire behavior that affect to the plants, to the vegetation, the plant species traits, landscape complexity characteristics, and also post-fire mitigation actions. What happens is that few years later, if there is not management or even mismanagement, we come back to this initial state in which we have a landscape that it's again ready to burn. So the point of doing this kind of assessment of work is to avoid that can happen again, to avoid that we come back to this initial state, or at least to help to avoid to come back to this state. For doing this kind of assessment, we can use remote sensing. Remote sensing is a really powerful tool. Actually, remote sensing with satellite imagery provide us a large spatial coverage and temporal continuity that it's free and open access. For example, Landsat mission started in 1972 until now, and it will continue, of course, and Sentinel more recently. Also, satellite-based remote sensing provide us cost-effective and repeatable solutions. It's sensitive to vegetation changes, that it's what we are looking for. It's complementary with field data, and of course, it's easily integrated with GIS and modeling. Just to give a small context why we are doing this work, it's because it's inside of a really big project that it's the Agenda Transform, that it's one of the agendas that are in Portugal under the PRR umbrella. So going to the study, this is the study area that we can see in the image. That it's in the central north Portugal, and covers more than 550,000 hectares. We define this study area taking in consideration that must have a large productive area of eucalyptus and maritime pine, since they are two of the three most important species that we have in Portugal. Also, we want to capture this management or mismanagement or not management that it's done in the small forest ownership structure that we have in this area, and also the fire recurrency that we have here. So, of course, the mainland cover that we have here was eucalyptus with almost 60% and maritime pine. But of course, we are studying wildfires, so fire history is important. And what we have here, what we can see in the image on our left, it's all the burn area that we had in this area between 1990 and 2022. As we can see, it's a lot of hectares that burn. Not every year burns the same surface, even burns a little bit, but as we can see in the graph that we have in the middle, there was a year that outstands the other. That was the 2017 rural fires that for sure all the Portuguese remember. And inside of this area, in this year, more than 91,000 hectares burn. And that's why we're interested in the recovery after this fire. So moving to the workflow that we apply, we can resume this in 5 main steps. We start just collecting all the Landsat imagery from 2015 to 2023. And after we estimate the MVR vegetation index, that it's a vegetation index that it's really sensitive to fire and to vegetation regrowth after the fires. With this, we estimate we obtain two intermediate outputs that are the ones that we obtain from the relative recovery index, in which we measure the vegetation recovery, and after the other secondary intermediate output, I will say, was the one that we obtained from the continuous, after applying the continuous change detection and classification algorithm that will help us to identify post-fire management. We integrate these two outputs in this final map, the post-fire landscape evolution map, and we perform an accuracy assessment. In the final map, we define 4 classes, taking in consideration if there were or not recovery of the vegetation, and if there were or not, or it was an absence of post-fire management. So going more in detail of these two intermediate steps that are really important, we will start with the relative recovery index. This is a vegetation index that allows to quantify the recovery after the disturbance, in that case the fire, by comparing the spectral values of the indices that we have before and after the fire. To construct or to estimate this index, we have to use another vegetation index, that it's the normalized burn ratio, the MVR that I was explaining before, that it's really sensitive to fire disturbance and post-fire regrowth. So we took this Landsat imagery, and for each year we estimate the annual NVR, and after we apply this formula that we have here. And we have the second, let's say, the second part, the second intermediate output that was done by applying the continuous change detection and classification. Well, this is a bit more complex to explain, but basically it's an algorithm that allows us to detect land cover changes in all the pixels of an image by analyzing their spectral signature over time. So more in detail, I think it's more easily to explain with this graphic. So in a satellite imagery, we have our study area, we have all the pixels of the satellite imagery. So we take, or we plot better, all the pixel values over time, as we can see in the image that we have in the middle. And by using harmonic regression, we fit to cover these points. But of course, there is some time, over time, there is a point in which there is an abrupt change of the pixel value, and there is a breakpoint. This breakpoint, what means is that there has been some kind of land cover change. And since we are assessing all the land cover changes after 2017, what we assume, after eliminating, of course, the new burn areas that it's possible that happens, what we have is that, or what we assume is that there has been some kind of post-fire management. So again, we use the land time series of imagery of Landsat from 2015 to 2024. We use different bands and vegetation index all together, and we estimate, we apply the CCDC algorithm. After integrate this in the final product, we also we integrate these two intermediate products in the final one. But of course, we have to make an accuracy assessment to know how well fit to the reality or not. For that, we do data collection, 100 samples randomly selected inside of the burn areas that we can see in the map. It was data collection based on field work, very high resolution satellite imagery, and also aerial imagery. And of course, we classify in these 4 categories that I was explaining before. That, for example, this is in field what it looks like, these 4 categories. After that, we perform accuracy assessment. We perform the overall accuracy, and also we estimate the precision, recall, and F1 score statistics. So moving to the exploratory results, here what we have is the result of applying the relative recovery index that we have in our lab. Maybe it's not possible to see from there, but the values of this index goes from 0 to 2. But what is the meaning of these values? Well, all the values that are close to 0 or more closest to 0 means that the vigorosity of the vegetation that we have now, it's lower than the one that we had before. So that means that there were no recovery. On the contrary, when it's close to 2, what means is that the vigorosity of the vegetation, in that case, actually has more vigorosity than the one that we have previously to the fire. So that means that we have a positive recovery. So as we were interested to know if there was or there wasn't recovery, we reclassify these values to obtain what we call the post-fire vegetation recovery map that we have in our right. In a with a similar approach, we follow a similar approach. Also in the second intermediate output, the one that we obtained from the CCDC algorithm. And the result of this algorithm is the one that we have in our lab. So with these colors, what we have, it's the year in which it was identified the last change, the detection of the last change, the land cover change, sorry. So again, as we are interested if there were or not management, all the change detection after 2017 or 18, we classify as there has been, of course, management, because there has been some change after the fire. The other was classified as a not management in the new map. So we took these two outputs, we integrate in the final map, that it's the one that we have in the middle of the slide, with these four classes. And what we can see in the table is that there are mainly two classes that outstands from the others, that are the areas in which there were not recovery, but there has been post-fire management. This one that we can see are close to Figueira da Foz, I think that it is. Yeah, in the left part of the map, that it's more related with Pinus, Martin Pine forest, that it's the strategy actually that we have for recover the forest. So we have to replant, most of the times in that case was replanted. And on the other side, we have the area, the other class that outstands, it's the area in which there was recovery and there was post-fire management, that it's more related to areas of eucalyptus, since it's a responder species. The accuracy assessment that we performed the accuracy assessment, and we obtained an overall accuracy of 62%, and the statistics of precision, recall, and F1 score was more or less also between the 60% and 60-something%. So as conclusions, what we saw is that the landscape saw a similar recovery and non-recovery rates, but what we saw is a significant post-fire management, what it's really nice, actually. However, taking into consideration the accuracy assessment, there is still room for improvement that we are working on. We face some limitations that are related to the sensitivity of the vegetation index that we apply, but also to the small holding ownership forest landscape that we have. Because, why? That it's because we were using Landsat satellite imagery, that it's has a spatial resolution of 30 meters, and sometimes we have properties in this area that it's so narrow that it's impossible. Actually, it could be 10 meters, so it's impossible to catch these land cover changes or management if it has been done. Anyway, the methodology allows us to observe the resilience of the landscape by integrating two fundamental factors that will influence the future wildfire behavior, that it's the vegetation recovery and the management. As I said before, we are still working on it. It's an ongoing work, so further improvements will include the use of higher resolution satellite imagery, such as Sentinel-2, and also test different land cover algorithms other than CCDC, and also to test another parameters inside of the algorithm that we've used. So thank you very much for your attention, and actually that is what we want to avoid. It's the fires, to try to have this interesting and nice forest that we have in the background, in green. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation, to all of you. And we'll now open the floor to questions that you'd like to raise to any of our colleagues. We'll be very happy to respond to your doubts or suggestions of studies. Take your time. Okay, I will start then. Okay. try to break the ice. I will start here with Catarina on a question that I don't like to anticipate the answer, but in this picture of climate change, what type of cautions are you taking when you select the parasitoids, for instance, to attack these beasts? What type of cautions or studies are you anticipating to understand how will they react in a picture of climate change? And what can you do if you have any type of thinking on a B plan if something fails?
I think this is on.
No.
It's working? Green? Okay, sorry. Okay, I would like to have something specific to tell you. I don't. Why? Because I usually, sometimes I use this example. One thing, we have two types of systems. We have complicated systems, like a car. It's complicated, but with a blueprint, anyone can build the car. And then there are complex systems, and nature is a complex system, and we try to control everything we can think of: temperature, humidity, rain, wind, soil, anything we can think of. And the interactions are so complex that we get lost in the middle. So when it comes to climate change, we're kind of expecting, we're waiting to see what happens, because sometimes, like some pests, for instance, Phoracantha, which is a pest that attacks eucalyptus when they are water stressed, we can predict that the situation will become harsher, will become more complicated. But when we're dealing with parasites, the parasite interacts with the pest interacts with the plant, and then the plant interacts with everything around it. So like in the case of vanaf nitans, we have a problem in high altitude area because as a colleague of ours in Altri studied, parasitism rate is influenced by the temperature, the minimum temperature of the 3 coldest months. So if if temperatures rise, possibly anaphtogenians will become more effective. But it's academically very, very interesting, but the truth is we're not working on it. Yes, we're waiting and seeing and adjusting. We're trying to adapt to what happens, but we have failed to anticipate.
Thank you very much. I was anticipating. It's a complex, very complex situation. It's very risky in this situation, particularly with the existing legislation on how to introduce new species into the European Union's environment. But anyhow, thank you very much. I will jump to Pedro now. Just also a clarification on your presentation. Quite. On bibliography, you can see that the response of different genetic materials to rooting is quite diverse. You mentioned that you use four different materials, 2 hybrids and 2 eucalyptus clones. Can you not open the book completely, but how do you feel about this reaction of the different materials you use to the experiment you made? So you presented the averages. What about the variation between the different genotypes to the treatment?
Yes, it's working. There is differences found. It's a little bit of what we find with the traditional methods. Normally, culture globulus can have higher rootings in some instances. In others, a little bit more reduced. That's why there's a little bit more of deviation in the data. But we found that globulus normally spend a little bit more time, a couple more days in a system. There's a slower rooting process. But I checked the rooting only for globulus. I checked before, and the rootings are very similar. There isn't the average of the global species is not very different from the total averages. So the routings actually is a little bit higher in the hybrids, but like 5% maybe, and so on 5% lower in the globals. This is also seen in the mortality. We have a little bit more mortality in the culture globus, which is what we expect in most cases. In the hybrids, a little bit less mortality. But they both behaved very well in the system. Concretely in the system, there may be a little bit more mortality regarding the globulus, because there's other problems such as pests that we have in our nurseries, and we know we have. It's a problem we are trying to solve, but there's a little bit mortality in regards to that. But the routing averages do not change very much between them. There's a little bit change in the timings of the evolution of the callus of the routing process, but in the end we find that despite the high mortalities, it's still better than in the traditional process, and it's a very good. It can be a very good system in the future to run a little bit from the problems we have in substrate. I hope I've answered.
Yes, I was going to ask you only one later thing. If the clones selected were those considered hard routers or average routers or good routers? Just for curiosity, no?
Two, three of them were good routers, but there are also ones that the routing depends a little bit on the timings over the year. So in 1 month, the routing can be very high. And the next month, the routing could be very low. That's also why there's a lot of deviation in the data. We have a good trials and trials that are very good for one clone, but very bad for the other. But it's consistent between the traditional method and the hydroponic. So we see that it is clone specific. It's genetics. We have to try and work around it. Because it would be really good to find a way to surpass this and have high routings for everything, and we can produce the best. But it's research that takes a lot of time, and it's very precise and hard to do.
Thank you. I think we are on the complexity side.
Very complex, yeah.
Now for Luís, sorry, it's also coming back to complexity. You mentioned that you believe that the algorithms can be improved if we use images with a higher resolution, like the Sentinel-3. I think you also mentioned that the size of the land plots in forest plots are tricky because some are fairly small. Can you reflect a little bit? Okay, there's opportunity there, but will be also an additional problem by having a too high resolution with 10 by 10. That's one question. And the second one is, how do you believe that it could be, the accuracy of the models could be improved by going through a larger set of imageries, from the time perspective, looking some years before the event occur. You mentioned 2017. By using images older, 5 years older, to get a better grip on the evolution of the stands and of the different indexes, to improve that accuracy. What's your feeling? Will this help, or will be only add to more data with more variability and difficult to interpret that?
Well, it's a good question, and as we say in Spain, that it's where I'm from, it depends. Yeah. So yeah, what you are saying is true. More detailed images or imagery means that, well, we can see better, but also it can be a headache because it's more information, and we cannot go to the big detail, because if not, we cannot generalize to the complexity of the terrain. In that case, yeah, better or bigger resolution of the images will help us for that case, because of what I was speaking before. We have in Portugal, I will say a structural problem, that it's that we don't have the cadastre of the properties in the forestry, something that it's really important and useful when we are using the satellite imagery to guide us. And I say that because since we are using images of 30 meters of spatial resolution, and we are going to compare sometimes with a property that it's really narrow, or even we don't know if there is one property or another or whatever, more higher resolution will help us to hide this situation. Actually, we were using Landsat because has more a collection that came of satellite imagery that came from few years before, instead of Sentinel, that has a biggest resolution. And it's important to also to come back more time before, instead of stay to counting from the 2017 information, because also this is going to help us to interpret how the landscape has evolved with previous fires, and how can evolve with this fire that we had in 2017. Actually, it's a bit complex because this algorithm, that the CCDC algorithm, the outputs that we can get are a lot more than the ones that I present. In that case, what we use is when it was detected the last year of change, but also it could have been another output that it's when was the first land cover detection, or even which was the more abrupt change detection. So yeah, it's important to open the time span to previous satellite imagery. But the problem is, it's more complex, more information, and it's more chaotic. I think that I answered to the question. I hope so.
Thank you very much. I don't know if any one of you just now get the courage or the interest to raise a question. Last chance. Oh yes. Good.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentations. I have a question for Catarina Gonçalves. Is the insects that you're researching for control against Acacia dealbata specific only to Acacia dealbata, or Acacia mearnsi, for example, due to its proximity? Will it also be affected? Do you have any idea or not? I know it's less prevalent in Portugal, but it also exists. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I should have said that. Yes, these insects, so far, we haven't and done all the tests. Besides host specificity, we want to see host range within Acacia genus. And we expect the Acacia mearnsi to also be eaten, because it is eaten in Australia. In fact, one of those insects is actually a pest of Acacia, both dealbata and mearnsi. And some preliminary tests that we ran also show that they can eat a little bit of Acacia longifolia, melanoxylon, and we will test all the acacias. Probably Acacia baeliana, which also has the composite leaf. It will probably be affected also. And I don't think it will be a problem if they're all eaten, because it's a foreign genus here in Portugal. I think we'll be comfortable with it. And yes, we expect them to attack multiple Acacia species.
Okay, thank you very much. We will close the session. We are reaching our time. Yes, okay. Before asking you to join me in applauding our speakers, I would like just to give you some information, saying that we're going to have a break, a coffee break now. It will be here in this floor, and we ask you to join again in the room at 6:30 for the next session, so that we can fulfill in the timetable. And also I have here in bold to take a look at the application where you can find important information for the event. So please join me in applauding our speakers, and thank you very much for your presentations.